Welcome to Lighten Up, a show about bringing more love, light, and joy into your life, and archived on the Lighten Up program page. Now the host of Lighten Up, Isabel Merians.
Welcome to Lighten Up with Isabel, your good news show. I'm delighted to have you join us today, and I have a special treat in store, and that's Dr. Robert Kanderjian.
Thank you.
And before I start with Robert, I would like to tell you some general good news that's happened throughout 2017. And today, good news is more and more difficult to find, but I found some good stuff. So I'm going to start out by saying that in 2017, scientists have discovered populations of rare wildlife and rediscovered certain species that they thought were extinct. So that's very exciting. I found out that some countries have created large marine protection areas. A few of these other countries have granted land rights to indigenous populations. So I really applaud that.
Yes.
It's really quite wonderful. And also a delegation bypassed Trump and committed to keeping America's Paris goals alive. Another bit of good news is that philanthropies and large corporations have made huge commitments of money to the environment. And the other thing I would like to say is that green plants, as a result of global warming, are actually growing larger and larger. The positive thing about that is they absorb more carbon and put more oxygen into the atmosphere. So those are all really happy things. Now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Robert Kanderjian. Robert is an intuitive healer, a chiropractor, and he has helped hundreds of people by combining Eastern and spiritual modalities with his medical training. Robert, when did you first start including the Eastern modalities into your healing practices?
About 15 years after I was in practice, I realized that just working with the body was not enough for me, and I wanted to integrate the soul aspects, the emotional aspects, the belief systems, and make it a little more integrated, because it was a little frustrating just working with the body. So it happened about 12 to 15 years into my practice, and I've been practicing 35 years now.
Some And so did you find that made a big difference?
It made a big difference for the patients, no doubt. Not all patients were open to it. Some patients just want the physical piece and they don't want to hear about the other things.
Right.
But most patients were open, and it was very fulfilling for me.
Now, did this also get you more deeply into your own spiritual journey?
Yeah, it did. It made me investigate more. I've always been curious, I mean, I studied comparative religion in college and all that kind of training. So I've always been curious, but this really forced me to learn more about what does mind, body, spirit really mean. And I learned a lot. It was quite an education for me, and of course, part of that was applying it to my own life and to my own health and to my own relationships. And
so did you using meditation? What were the primary things that you
that's a good
brought
question.
in?
I'll tell you, there are a number of primary things, but if I had to really touch the first one, I would say it's about listening to ourselves. It's about getting quiet, moving to that Zen state, as we say, and really listening, because I really believe happiness is making good decisions. And if we're not listening and we're just in this chatter or in emotional drama, we're never going to make the right decisions. So for me, listening was the primary the stillness. The stillness.
Now,
Right?
do you mean it's similar to, they always say listen to your heart?
Yeah.
You'll
More
make
like
the
listen
right
to
into
your
your
gut.
gut.
Listen to your gut. Intuition, and listen to your body. Like, women are usually better at this than men because women are more visceral beings. They're always in touch with their body because
And their
they have
feelings,
to be.
yeah.
And so for women, it's very easy to connect to their senses and say, oh, my body doesn't feel right about this trip or about this person or about this diet. So it's about that being still and listening to what the body is saying rather than what the head is saying.
Well, I think the head trips us up very often.
Yeah, doesn't it?
And if there's ever a conflict, as they say, between the head and the heart, or between the head and the gut,
Yeah.
always go with the heart of the gut.
Yeah. To kind of follow up on that, the heart can also trip us up too,
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
a lot of times the heart
Wants what it wants.
Yes, it wants what it wants. It can be overgiving without recognizing the necessary boundaries or the necessary decisions.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, this is what we're always striving for, is that balance.
Yes,
The balance between...
right. The balance between stillness and activity, like especially in this country. This country is a very active country. You go to some other countries, their energy is a little bit more... Well, we're in the New York metro area, so it's definitely very active.
Right.
But you go... and there's a lot of activity here. And so we have to work at creating that balance between activity and stillness.
Well, I think very few people take the time for the stillness.
Yes.
Just the time, whether it's to meditate or just to sit quietly.
Yes.
Or to listen to the actual...
Right.
I remember once hearing a lecture by Deepak Chopra when he was first starting out.
Right.
And one of the comments he said is, always be careful of what you think, because your cells are always listening.
That's well said. I like
And
that.
I like that. And I always remember that. And I thought, wow, that's really pretty profound if you think about it.
Yeah.
Because the person who says, oh, I couldn't do that, or I can't possibly accomplish this, or whatever, they literally, their thoughts defeat them before they even get going.
Right. And, and in this culture, which is a very dynamic, active culture, to teach people that doing nothing, just being in that stillness, is actually productive.
Absolutely.
Because this culture relies on productivity. And, Einstein has said a number of times that some of his best ideas came when he was just being, not doing. So to see the state of stillness and being as a productive enterprise rather than a waste of time.
Well, not only that, it's during those times that we have our best insights, our best thoughts, our best productivity. As a matter of fact, Einstein did what he called a series, what did he call them? Sleep experiments or dream experiments. I'm trying to remember the exact phrase. But he said that when he was in that state, he envisioned himself riding on a ray of light, which brought him to one of his greatest theories. And also, it's very fascinating because there have been many incidences of people who have dreamed whole sequences of events that they used in their scientific pursuits.
Yes. There are so many parts to our experience that aren't recognized in the health community, in the healing process. Like you just brought up dreams, right? Like dreams, for example, when we're working with a cancer patient, and a cancer patient brings to us a set of dreams that they feel is important, we should listen.
Absolutely.
Because those dreams may be saying something that can help the healing process. You see,
absolutely.
So it's really, I think that's what I like about the integrative model or the holistic model, because we're really listening to the patient. And I think that's the other shift that needs to happen in medical care. which is we need to start listening to the patient more and giving them time to talk about their condition. And because it's really beautiful information if we're really listening with that third ear. It's beautiful information.
Well, I had a friend in Florida who had gotten an unfortunate diagnosis of having cancer behind one of her eyes. And, the doctors suggested whatever they suggested. So I said to her, Agnes, what are you doing? She said, every night before I go to bed, I give myself the suggestion that while I'm asleep and while I'm dreaming, these little cells that look like Pac-Man are going to come in and devour the cancer.
Yes.
And eventually she became fine.
That's great. That's good visualization.
Yeah, but I feel that visualization should be a major aspect of healing.
Hypnosis, visualization, not just for patients who are looking for psychological care, but even for patients who have diagnoses, like whether it's diabetes, heart disease. See, we need to start integrating more and more of these services, the psychological, the humanistic services, pet therapy, into these physical diagnoses. And that's what integration is about.
The good thing is I think more and more physicians are becoming open to this concept.
Yes.
Because I remember when I first got, I don't think any of my viewers know this, but I do have a master level in Reiki healing.
Right.
And I remember I had started a program at a home for the elderly here in Jersey, and a doctor who worked in New York asked me if I would institute a program for the hospital in New York that he was with, which was Sloan Kettering. And at that time, I didn't have the time to do it. And I couldn't go into New York on a daily basis.
Yes.
But the point is that more and more doctors are open to alternative hands-on type healing or therapeutic touch. All of these things are being brought in now.
Yes, I'm optimistic.
So I am optimistic.
Yes. I would like to see a little bit more funding to go towards that, to support it and also to research it. So, but we must stay optimistic, right?
Absolutely, always.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to tell my audience that Dr. Kanderjian has written 2 books.
Actually, 3.
3?
Yeah.
Oh, I only have 2.
Oh,
You're holding out on me, kid. One of them is called Sacred Intentions, which is quite wonderful. I just finished reading it. And the other one is called Life and Afterlife Q&A, which I have not read yet. I haven't had the opportunity, but I look forward to reading it. And these books are available through Amazon.com if you're interested. I think you'll find it very interesting. Now, one of the books, the book that I just finished, is called Sacred Intentions. And I thought it was quite wonderful. And quite honestly, Robert and I have been friends and fellow travelers on the spiritual path for a long time.
More than 20 years.
In reading his sacred, it's more than 20, wow.
Right.
In reading his Sacred Intentions, I found that there were many things that I address in the class that I teach on spirituality.
Yes.
So it was sort of like a reinforcement, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I'd really like to reference several of these intentions and have a little bit of a dialogue with Robert about this.
Sure.
And the first one is, in the beginning he talks about going to a private holy place.
Yes.
Which is the still, you define it.
Yeah, when we're looking to make decisions, because I have always felt happiness is making good decisions. You know how I know that? Because whenever I was miserable, it's because I had not made good decisions. So I've come to the conclusion that, in order for me to make good decisions, I have to get quiet. I have to stop the chatter. I have to not be over emotional about a subject matter, and go to that, as the book says, go to that private holy place. Mm-hmm. It is a private place and it is sacred, and just sit with that. Sit there quietly and listen. And the answers will come. They may not come at that moment, but they will eventually come. And
now, do you,
yes.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but do you give yourself the suggestion before you go to bed at night? Do you pose a question?
I pose a question if I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't have a question, I try to stay in gratitude for the blessings I do have, and I'm thankful for the day.
Sure.
Sometimes I pose questions for my patients, because sometimes I'll get patients who I'm kind of struggling with, and I'll get some answers that way.
Oh, that's great.
So, but the answers don't always come right away. It could take a day, a week or so, but they'll eventually come.
Now, when you first meet I said that you're an intuitive healer. When you
Yes.
first meet a new patient,
Yes.
do you pick up what is in the auric field,
Yes.
or do you go directly into? I'm just interested in how it works.
We have to respect the matter of privacy, because, like, when I meet somebody, I don't scan them. I don't tune in.
You have to ask permission.
Yeah, I want to have permission, and I want to respect their boundary. But if I have the permission to review what's going on, yes, it's part of the gift that I carry, which is to be able to scan and see, like, the area of the body that needs work. What area of the body doesn't have enough freedom? I call it that. What area of the body doesn't have enough freedom, and it's a bit stuck, and it's got some old material that needs to get cleared up, which could present both in physical issues as well as non-physical issues. Yeah.
So now, do you scan the chakras as well?
Yeah, it's scanning. It's both a clinical as well as an intuitive scan. Like, the clinical scan is, because I'm a clinician, it's like just the color of their fingernail, or the color of their skin, or how sparkling are their eyes. And so there's the clinical. How are they standing? What's their walking pace? And then there's an intuitive scan that's a little bit more subtle, and a little more subtle. And yes, so it's combining those two pieces of information. Yeah.
Before you come up with your diagnosis.
Yeah. But I also feel that people who have been practicing a long time, like I've found over the years working with nurses, I have found nurses who have been working 20, 25 years in their field have that intuitive scan. It's like they can look at somebody and they'll know. They'll just know. Like, there's a sense that kicks in. It's almost like an angelic information. The angels come in and give them the information and say, keep an eye on that guy. So it's combining the clinical and the intuitive. And when you've been doing it a long time, you just get better at it.
It gets easier and easier.
Yeah, it gets easier.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, the first one of your sacred intentions is, I intend to trust and live my intuition. And I think that's a very good one.
Right. And the key word on that one is trust. Because a lot of people are intuitive, especially women, which is a wonderful thing. But they don't always put it into action. It's like their intuition will say, no, I should not be going to that wedding or to that vacation, or I should not be eating that food, or I should change doctors, but they don't. They don't take action. They don't trust the intuition. I mean, part one is to feel the intuition, and there are many people who don't, which is sad. And that's what I try to help them with, to connect to that. And that's what you do as well. Part one is to feel that intuitive sense, and part two is to put it into action, isn't it? To trust it and put it into action.
To do it. Right. Well, I had to have a little story that I'll share with our viewers, and that is the story of being on a business trip with my husband once in Atlanta, Georgia. And he was there to take a select group of clients around to visit a series of southern factories. And he was to meet me in the hotel coffee shop at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And when he walked in, he was completely surrounded by darkness, and it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a sunny day. And I intuited that unless he came back with me to New Jersey, that something terrible was going to happen. I didn't know what. But I was with my parents, and he came in, and we chatted, and then I said to him, "You know, hon, you look so tired." I said, "Why don't you see if you can come back with me and let someone else," we had taken the customers out the night before. I said, "Let someone else take them on a tour of the factories."
Yeah.
And he said, "You know, I am tired." He said, "Let me see what I can do." So he got the last seat on the Delta flight coming back up to Newark. And we came home together. And the next morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. And he answered it and turned as white as a sheet. And I looked at him and I said, "The plane crashed, right?" He said, "Yes, everybody was killed."
Wow.
And it was, obviously I was very sorry for all the people who were killed. They found the black box immediately. It was a brand new plane, and there was absolutely no reason for the crash. So sometimes, and that was kind of a wake-up call for me.
Right.
Of course, my husband looked at me afterwards very suspiciously, as though I might be a witch or something. But
you know, the French have a saying, "Cherchez la femme," you know, which means look at the woman. Because really what they're saying there, the deeper meaning of that is like when initially it's been described as a saying that means behind every successful man there is a woman. But really on a deeper level what it means is that behind every healthy or successful man is a woman who is guiding him through her intuition. Because we men are more in our minds, women are more visceral and more intuitive. And so I really think that when we listen to our women, I'm not saying all women are centered and balanced in their intuition, but in most cases, a woman, the wise woman, right? The story of the wise woman is a really powerful story, and if we men can follow that, it can certainly help our evolution. Yeah,
well, that's a good
I was in
point.
Guatemala, and over there in the Mayan tradition, the primary guides or the primary elders are women. You know?
Really?
The men more or less follow the lead of the women. You know, so it was very interesting witnessing that, and I learned a lot from it. And so we must honor the wise woman tradition and the wise woman.
Well, thank you for saying that, Robert. I appreciate
example.
that.
Well, I mean that's what you do. You know.
I try.
Yes.
The next one I wanted to address was to ask for help and know when it is safe and fun. Many of us tend to always be the one who wants to give, who always want to be the one to help someone else, and rarely ask for help. And I admit to being guilty of this.
Yeah.
And you want to address that a little, Robert?
Right. The asking piece, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, the asking piece has to do with receiving. You know, most people who are good people, who are kind people, they're good at giving, but they're not necessarily good at receiving, and they don't necessarily ask. And sometimes I find myself that to help them develop the courage to ask and know that it can be a good thing, it can actually be a fun thing. For example, if there's a couch there and I need to move it, I mean, I can move it on my own. I might end up hurting my back, or I can call over my brother or a friend, and we can move it together, have fun doing it, and then sit down, share a meal together.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, of course.
So the asking piece is so important, and it just moves us out of isolation and loneliness.
Well, that's a good point. And I think it's very hard for certain people to do that. And
Yes.
to learn,
Well, you know,
learning to do that is not an easy go.
there's probably good reason. You know, I have this philosophy of a lot of people can't help. They can't help it. Meaning, it's like they do what they do, but they can't help it because of their childhood woundings, their wounding in their teens or 20s. They can't help it. If they, for example, if they were as children, when they did ask for help and they were bulldozed or they were humiliated or shamed, obviously they're going to be shy about asking for help.
But I don't think it necessarily comes from a wound. I came from a family in which there were 17 grandchildren.
Yeah.
And I was the oldest. So I was always used to being the one in charge of the entertainment, of caring for people. It's just how I've always lived my life. It's not that I'm reluctant to receive. You know what I'm saying?
So you were the oldest?
Yeah, I was the oldest of 17.
Yeah, the oldest is usually the most the responsible child. Mm-hmm. So you developed your responsible self, which is all about giving and not.
Yeah, well, that's my point. In other words, it doesn't have to come from some wound.
Yes.
I
agree. Right.
Now, one of the things I want to address, and that is forgiveness. I find that being able to let go, at least this is my experience in my classes, being able to let go of some supposed hurt or wound or unkindness frees up the energy that person has wasted, sometimes for 20 or 30 years.
Right.
I heard a story once of a woman who was still angry at a girl that she knew from third grade because the girl in third grade told her she had big feet. And she disliked this woman for 40 years.
Oh, my Lord.
So, I mean, so to waste your energy on something like that, or even, an obviously more serious thing, becomes an unfortunate thing. Mm-hmm. Buddha once said that holding on to anger or that kind of resentment or hurt is like holding a hot coal in your hand. It burns you and it doesn't hurt the other person. Right. So I think that releasing and letting go is one of the biggest issues.
Yes.
So would you like to address that?
Yeah. Well, the forgiveness piece has two components for me, the forgiving of others and forgiving of self, right?
Yes.
And, forgiving of others is, in the book I say I declare an intention to forgive others.
Yes,
right?
I know.
Because some things that some people have suffered are very, very difficult to forgive. Like I worked with a woman who came to me and she couldn't forgive, and she had suffered a terrible violation. And so I said to her, I'm not in any way suggesting you should forgive. Would you care to set an intention to forgive? Mm-hmm. And then we'll see where it goes.
And did that work?
Yeah, it did. I mean, it took her a number of years until she got to a more peaceful place. Mm-hmm. But some people just aren't ready because the hurt is so deep and the betrayal is so deep. And of course, a psychologist probably needs to help them through that, a good psychologist, right? And but ultimately, if we can set the intention to forgive, then the doors start opening. I feel like God, the universe, spirit just starts opening the door for that healing to happen as soon as we set the intention. Mm-hmm. Well, and the self-forgiveness piece, which I think is also a very difficult piece, similar to the previous. It's about setting the intention that I want to forgive myself. I can't, but I want to forgive myself. And just working through that. That's probably, we could do a whole show just on self-forgiveness because, in the tradition of many of some cultures, we don't really talk enough about that. We talk more about forgiving others. So the self-forgiveness piece is complex, and just as the forgiveness piece, but it's something that we should talk about.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I found helpful with forgiving others was I said to the class, one of the first classes that I taught, was what I want you to do is sit down, take a pencil and paper, and write exactly the person or the event that is so making you so unhappy. I want you to write it out in great detail, every detail that you can remember. I don't care how long it takes you, but please try to write it as comprehensively and completely as possible. Yeah. And then when you're finished writing it, I want you to take the paper and rip it up into small little pieces. Take those pieces and put them into an iron pot and burn it. Right. And when the very last smoke is coming up from the embers, I want you to inhale the smoke and say, my lost energy is returning to me. My lost energy is returning to me. 3 times.
That's a beautiful meditation.
And it was a really nice
Very
meditation,
powerful.
and they really seemed to like it. And that was one of the first classes that I ever taught.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
being here
You're
today,
so
Dr.
welcome.
Kanderjian.
Yes, you're so
Robert,
welcome.
it's really been a great pleasure.
I did want to touch on the third book that we didn't bring. It's okay.
I don't know it.
I wrote a third book which is called The Masculine Heart: What Makes Men Tick. After many years in the practice, I felt like I needed to write a book about men.
Good for
and
you.
how the culture that we live in affects us, especially especially in the way we define success, especially in this culture, in the Western culture, and how male self-acceptance, self-love, whatever we want to call it, has been affected by it in a negative way. So it's really about men and consumerism and what happens to our male values in a consumer culture,
Well, that sounds
which is also on Amazon. Yeah.
Well, that sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
I look forward to reading
I know.
it.
I'm so sorry we didn't bring that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for viewing today. It's been a great pleasure to be with you again.
Yes.
And we will see you at the next program of Lighten Up with Isabel. Hope you have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Until next time, remember to live a more joyous life. Lighten up.